Rebecca, I want to move into the boys' dorm with Jackson. Do you support me? As soon as I opened my eyes, my best friend Sophie was looking at me with red, teary eyes in my past life. I spent 2 hours trying to talk sense into her. I talked about her reputation, her safety, her self-respect, and her future. After listening to all of it, she glared at me with pure venom. Rebecca, you're just jealous that someone actually loves me. Later on, she lured me into that very boys' dorm, right before I was brutally attacked and left to die. I saw her twisted face looking down at me. Weren't you supposed to be so pure and full of self-respect? Look at you now getting ruined, like trash. I take a deep breath and grab her hand tightly.
So support you? Of course I support me.
You and Jackson are a match made in heaven. I hope you have 18 kids together. Go start your own soccer team. Sophie froze. Her pale cheeks suddenly flushed bright red. Rebecca, what are you talking about? We are still so young. Why would you bring up kids? I sneered in my head. If you hadn't used the excuse of going into labor in the boys' dorm, in our last life, I never would have been tricked into going inside. On the outside, I put on a gossipy, excited expression. Come on, I'm just looking forward to your beautiful future. She probably didn't expect me to actually support her. She looked a bit flustered. You really agree with me moving in there? Of course I do. Picked up my iced latte from the table and winked at her. You two are so perfect for each other. What is wrong with living together? But don't you think it might be a little unsafe? She bit her lip, looking at me with wide, pitiful eyes. My grip on my plastic cup tightened. I pushed down the surging thrill in my chest and quickly replied,
How could it be?
Jackson loves you so much. I would never let anyone disrespect you. You should just move in and enjoy your life with him. Hearing Jackson's name brought another blush to Sophie's fair face.
Oh, stop. Don't tease me.
I am being serious with you. There are 4 guys in that dorm room. I feel like. Before she could finish her sentence, I checked the time on my watch. I looked up. Jackson was storming toward our table in his sweatpants, looking incredibly aggressive. I let out a cold laugh. In my mind, in my previous life, he had arrived just in time to hear me say, You really shouldn't live with him in a boys' dorm. It is way too dangerous. He assumed I was trying to sabotage their pure, undying love. He slapped me so hard, I ended up in the hospital. This time I looked at his furious face and waved. Eagerly, Sophia is right here. He stopped in front of our table, casually bouncing his leg. What are you two talking about? Rebecca, you better not be talking trash about me. Sophie opened her mouth to speak, but I immediately jumped in and pointed an accusatory finger at him. Jackson, this is your fault. Sophie doesn't feel secure enough to live in your dorm. You are being a terrible boyfriend. Hearing this, Jackson narrowed his eyes. Sophie, just move in. I run that floor. My word is love. Once you move in, I'll have all the guys calling you the queen of the house. Sophie's face instantly turned crimson. All her previous worries vanished. She threw herself into his arms, gripping the edge of his shirt and whining softly. I watched the two of them practically glued together, and remembered their legendary, earth-shattering love story. Back at the start of freshman year, Jackson was jogging on the campus track in the pouring rain, trying to look like a tough athlete. He accidentally bowled over Sophie, who was holding an umbrella and playing the role of a melancholy indie girl. That one collision sparked the flames of their epic romance. While I was lost in thought, a few soft, suggestive whimpers reached my ears. Disgust flashed through my eyes. I couldn't stand looking at this perfect couple for another second. I stood up to leave, but Jackson's arrogant voice called out from behind me. Rebecca, Sophie, and I are going to hold our wedding in the dorm soon. You are her best friend, so you better show up. I looked back. Sophie's face was completely flushed. Now she lightly punched Jackson in the chest with her small fists. Jackson, what are you saying? Who holds a wedding in a dorm room? What is wrong with the dorm? Jackson hugged her tighter, lifting her slightly off the ground. All my brothers are there. It will be a party way better than those flashy, overpriced hotels. Sophie let out a soft gasp, but her eyes were sparkling. She was clearly tempted. She looked at me with a subtle shift in her gaze. Rebecca, you will come. Right before I could answer, she added another sentence in her soft, sweet voice. You will come, won't you? Rebecca, we grew up together. Our parents are friends. You wouldn't disrespect me like that, right? She was threatening me if I didn't attend her trashy dorm wedding. She was going to run crying to my parents. I lowered my eyes. My fingernails dug deeply into my palms. But when I looked up, there was a bright smile on my face. Why wouldn't I come? You are my absolute best friend, I said, emphasizing every word with genuine warmth. I wouldn't miss your wedding for the world. Sophie nodded in satisfaction and leaned back into Jackson's embrace. I walked out of the coffee shop, forcing down the nausea rising in my throat. There was no rush in this life. I had all the time in the world to watch them destroy themselves. I stayed in the campus library until closing time, before taking a slow walk back to my building. The moment I pushed open my dorm room door, I froze. Sophie was squatting on the floor, shoving clothes into her suitcase, and my bed was completely covered in dirty, random trash. Why did you put all your junk on my bed? Before I could finish, I noticed a figure standing out on our balcony, surrounded by a cloud of smoke. Jackson was leaning against the railing with a cigarette in his mouth. He jutted his chin at me in greeting. The boys' dorm and the girls' dorm were separated by a massive courtyard, but we were juniors now. The resident advisors had stopped doing strict room checks a long time ago.
Oh,
Hey, Rebecca, you're back. He blew out a puff of smoke. He acted like my dorm room was his own living room. Sophie didn't even look up. She just kept folding her clothes. Jackson came over to help me pack. I have too much stuff. I can't carry it all by myself. I stood in the narrow walkway, trembling with rage.
move out of the way.
You're blocking the door. Jackson crushed his cigarette out on our balcony railing and casually flicked the butt outside. He sat down heavily on Sophie's mattress and wrapped an arm around her waist. Rebecca, please. Don't be mad, she said, looking up at me with a subtle hint of bragging in her voice. Jackson just cares about me so much. He insisted on coming over to help. My eyes swept past her face and landed on my desk. It was completely empty. More than half of my skincare products were missing. The expensive highlighter I just bought was gone. I looked down at Sophie's bulging suitcase. Through the zipper gap, I could see the familiar packaging of my own cosmetics. Sophie, did you take my things? She looked up at me, blinking her big, innocent eyes. She spoke as if she was doing me a favor. Rebecca, your skin is already so rough. Using such expensive makeup is a total waste. You should just let me use it. I have naturally great skin. It won't go to waste on me. I was so angry, I almost laughed out loud. So, by your logic, everything nice in the world belongs to you. Oh, come on. Look how close we are. She waved her hand dismissively and went back to shoving things into her bag. You are so generous. You wouldn't hold a grudge over something this small, right? I turned my gaze to Jackson. Jackson, I thought your family was rich. Aren't you a big stock market investor? Why don't you just buy Sophie her own makeup? He squeezed Sophie's waist and let out a scoff. Money is meant for the big leagues. Besides, makeup is full of toxic chemicals. Highlighter especially brings bad luck. I am just looking out for Sophie. Sophie immediately agreed.
Exactly.
Jackson needs to save his money for our future business ventures. Plus, I barely even wear makeup. I am naturally pretty. I'm only taking this stuff to prep for our dorm wedding. Honestly, Rebecca, when did you get so stingy? I stared at her, the corners of my mouth curling up. Your skin is incredibly thick. I definitely can't compete with that. Sophie took that as a victory and let out a smug little hum. I pulled out my phone and pointed the camera straight at her. And Jackson. The flash went off. Sophie's head snapped up. What are you doing? Just keeping some memories. I waved my phone with a bright smile, documenting your beautiful life together. Jackson's face darkened. He closed the distance between us in 2 strides and reached out to snatch my phone. I flipped my hand, caught his wrist, and twisted it hard. Jackson panicked and tried to pull away, but I just applied more pressure. He gritted his teeth. His face turned beet red, and the veins on his forehead popped out. Sophie screamed from the background. Rebecca, let him go. I ignored her, staring dead into Jackson's eyes. He tried to break free twice, but his wrist didn't budge an inch. Finally, he looked away in defeat and squeezed a sentence out through gritted teeth. Sophie, give her stuff back. Sophie's eyes went wide. Jackson. I said, give it back. She reluctantly squatted down and began tossing my things back onto my desk. One by one, my highlighter rolled across the wood and almost fell off the edge. I caught it smoothly and smiled at her. Sophie, you are not taking a single thing that belongs to me. Jackson stopped at the doorway, stiffened his neck, trying to regain some dignity. Rebecca, don't you understand basic biology? Men have absolute physical dominance. I was just caught off guard. You got a lucky sneak attack. In a real fight, you wouldn't stand a chance.
I didn't even bother looking at him.
I was completely exhausted by his existence. Yeah, sure. Whatever you say. Their faces turned a mixture of green and white before they scurried out the door, like rats. Once Sophie moved into the boys' dorm, the two of them completely lost their minds. During our investment theory class, Jackson interrupted the professor and plugged it in his own USB drive. The projector displayed a chaotic green candlestick chart, covered in arrows and circles. "These are my trading records from last month." Jackson pointed at the screen, his voice booming across the lecture hall. "I bought the dip 7 times 1,000% profit." The professor pushed his glasses up his nose, thoroughly confused. "What technical indicators are you using?" "I don't use that garbage. I trade on pure alpha instinct." The entire class, including the professor, was stunned into absolute silence. Late at night in the dorm, four shirtless guys would crowd around a laptop playing Minesweeper. Sophie posted on her social media, "Jackson is holding a shareholder meeting for our future. He works so hard for me." Things escalated day by day. Every new event broke my understanding of human stupidity. Until today, when I came across an anonymous post on the campus forum. The original poster was furious. "Can the guys in the boys' dorms stop smoking inside? Do you have any respect for pregnant women? I am about to give birth. If anything happens to my baby, you won't be able to pay for the damages." Attached was a photo of a smoke-filled dorm room. In the corner, you could faintly see a bottom bunk draped in pink bed sheets. I stared at the photo. I analyzed it. I zoomed all the way in. Sitting on the floor were a pair of ugly bunny slippers. The purse hanging on the bedpost belonged to Sophie. The comment section was a total war zone. "Dear God, did the frat house get haunted by a female ghost? I'm dying laughing. All the guys on that floor are in training to be stepdads. That is no ghost. She is Mother Teresa, volunteering her services for the whole floor. Are you guys missing the point? The issue is the smoke. Secondhand smoke can cause miscarriages."
No, you
are missing the point. Why is there a pregnant woman living in the boys' dorm? You just don't get it. This is a fully integrated campus experience. From enrollment to the grave. All in one building. Am I the only one who cares about those bunny slippers? Drop the link. Scrolled through the comments one by one. I could not stop smiling. She was about to give birth. That meant Sophie was already pregnant, before she ever moved into the boys' dorm. Good thing she moved out when she did. If she had stayed with me, I would have been dragged into this absolute circus. I closed the app, leaned back in my chair, and let out a long breath. The forum post buzzed around the campus for a few days, before the hype slowly died down. Sophie continued to update her social media, as if she hadn't seen a single comment. "Jackson bought me a whole case of milk. He says pregnant women need calcium. He loves me so much." Jackson said we need to start prenatal education. He is teaching the baby how to trade crypto. The guys in the dorm bought a gift for the baby. The attached photo was a pack of cigarettes. Every post drained my sanity, but I took a screenshot of every single one. Time flew by. Sophie and Jackson posted digital invitations on the campus message board, inviting everyone to their wedding. "Brothers, come witness true love." Comment section exploded immediately. The dean of students is probably weeping from the heavens right now. Absolute legends. I am stressing over finals. And these two are completing major life milestones in a twin XL bed. College is way too lenient. Is nobody going to step in and stop these lunatics? They called it a wedding, but it was really just a few cheap balloons taped to the hallway walls. The table was covered in cheap beer cans and a massive bag of sunflower seeds. Sophie wore a cheap white tulle dress. Her belly was so large, she couldn't zip up the back. She had to use one of Jackson's hoodies to cover it up. She posted a massive photo dump. "Today, I am the happiest woman in the world." In the photos, she stood in the middle of the grimy hallway. Axon had his arm around her waist. Behind them, several shirtless guys were throwing up peace signs. I would never forget those faces for the rest of my life. I quietly saved all the photos to my camera roll. Sophie's mother was not a merciful woman. These would come in handy. At 6 o'clock in the evening, my phone blew up. The screen lit up with a contact name that made my chest tighten with a familiar, cold dread. Mrs. Vance. Sophie's mother. In my previous life, Mrs. Vance had been a terrifying figure of cold authority. She was a woman obsessed with social climbing, appearances, and rigid control. When Sophie had ruined her reputation by moving into the boys' dorm and falling pregnant, Mrs. Vance hadn't blamed her precious daughter. Instead, she had turned her wrath entirely on me, accusing me of leading Sophie astray and failing to protect her. She had used her family's connections to make sure my family's small business was blacklisted, pushing my parents into financial ruin. While I lay recovering in the hospital from the assault, I took a slow, deep breath, letting the anger settle into a cold, hard focus. I swiped the screen to answer, keeping my voice light, cheerful, and entirely innocent. "Hi, Mrs. Vance. How are you?" Rebecca. Her voice cut through the line, sharp as a razor and dripping with aristocratic disdain. What is the meaning of this? I've been trying to call Sophie for 3 hours and her phone is turned off. And now my social media feed is flooded with congratulations from our family friends. Someone sent me a screenshot of a campus post. Something about a wedding in a university dormitory. Tell me this is a sick joke. I bit my lower lip, letting out a soft, hesitant gasp. Oh, Mrs. Vance, you didn't know? I thought Sophie told you. She was so excited about it. Tell me what, Rebecca? The older woman demanded, her voice rising an octave. What has she done? Well, I hesitated, playing the part of the reluctant, nervous best friend to perfection. Sophie and Jackson, they had their wedding tonight.
It was in the
Third-floor hallway of the boys' dorm. They didn't want to spend money on a fancy hotel because Jackson is saving his capital for his high-frequency trading. It was really cozy. They had balloons and all of Jackson's roommates were there. They even drank cheap beer to celebrate. Silence stretched over the line. It was a heavy, suffocating silence that told me Mrs. Vance's blood pressure was reaching dangerous heights. A wedding, she whispered, her voice trembling with sheer fury. In a boys' dormitory? With fear?
Yes.
And Sophie looked so beautiful. I continued, my voice dripping with sweet, venomous enthusiasm. The hoodie she wore over her dress was a bit big, but it covered her baby bump nicely. Oh, wait, she did tell you about the baby,
right?
She's been living in the boys' dorm for a few weeks now.
She said she
needs to be close to Jackson so he can do prenatal education with his crypto
charts.
It's so modern. A baby. The scream that erupted from the receiver was so loud I had to pull the phone away from my ear. I smiled in the quiet of my room. The trap was set. Rebecca, are you telling me my daughter is pregnant and living in a communal male dormitory like a common streetwalker? Mrs. Vance hissed, her breathing ragged. Mrs. Vance, please don't say that, I said, feigning deep distress.
Sophie is
the queen of the house there. All of Jackson's roommates call her that.
I can
send you the pictures from the wedding so you can see how happy she is.
They
look so natural in that hallway. Send them to me, right now. Of course. I just want Sophie to have her mother's blessing, I murmured. As soon as the call ended, I selected the entire gallery of screenshots and photos I had saved, the cheap balloons, the dirty beer cans, the shirtless, smirking frat boys throwing up peace signs around a visibly pregnant Sophie in her ill-fitting dress, and the public forum comments mocking Mother Teresa and her bunny slippers. I hit send. 10 seconds later, the read receipts turned blue. I leaned back in my chair, picked up a pen, and began to casually sketch on a notepad. The first domino had been pushed. Now, all I had to do was sit back and watch the gravity of their own stupidity pull them down. The boys' dorm, Sector 3, was notorious for its lax supervision, but it wasn't
completely lawless.
It was just that the resident advisors were lazy seniors who could be bribed with a six-pack of beer or a promise of a quiet weekend. At 7:30 p.m., the quiet evening of Sector 3 was shattered. I had positioned myself at a concrete bench in the courtyard, holding a textbook as a cover. From this angle, I had a perfect view of the entrance to the boys'
dorm.
A sleek, black Mercedes SUV screeched to a halt right in the fire lane.
The door
flung open, and Mrs. Vance stepped out. She was dressed in a tailored cream trench coat, her hair styled in a flawless, rigid bob, and her designer heels clicked against the pavement like gunfire. Behind her walked two burly men in dark suits, bodyguards from her family's security detail.
She didn't hesitate.
She marched straight past the front desk, ignoring the startled student worker who tried to ask for her ID. The two bodyguards flanked her, their presence alone enough to silence any objections. I quietly closed my textbook, stood up, and followed at a safe, discreet
distance.
By the time I reached the third floor, the hallway was already in chaos.
The
cheap balloons that had decorated the walls for the wedding were being popped under Mrs. Vance's heels as she strode toward room 302. The door to room 302 was cracked open. Inside, music was blaring, some terrible, bass-heavy trap music that Jackson loved. The smell of cheap vape juice, stale sweat, and burnt instant noodles drifted into the corridor. Mrs. Vance didn't bother knocking. One of her bodyguards raised a heavy boot and kicked the door wide open. The hinges groaned, and the door slammed against the interior wall with a deafening crash. The music stopped instantly. What the hell? Jackson's voice boomed from inside. He was sitting on a plastic gaming chair, wearing nothing but his boxers and a dirty gray tank top. He had a controller in his hand and a cigarette dangling from his lips. Sophie was lying on the twin XL bed, her head propped up on a pile of unwashed laundry, eating cheese puffs straight from the bag. "Get up, Mrs. Vance said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it possessed a freezing, absolute authority that made the temperature in the room drop 10 degrees. Sophie froze, a cheese puff halfway to her mouth. Her eyes went wide, turning pale with terror. Mother, what are you doing here?" "I asked you to get up, Sophia," Mrs. Vance repeated, her eyes scanning the tiny, filthy room. Her gaze lingered on the empty beer cans, the dirty plates piled in the corner, and finally, the protruding swell of Sophie's stomach. Beneath her oversized hoodie, Jackson, recovering from his initial shock, stood up. He tried to puff out his chest, stepping in front of Sophie to assert his alpha dominance. "Hey, who do you think you are, busting in here?" Jackson sneered, pointing a finger at Mrs. Vance. "This is private property. I run this floor. You need to get your old, wrinkly face out of here before I have my boys throw you out." I almost laughed aloud from my hiding spot around the corner of the hallway. Jackson really had no idea who he was dealing with. In his mind, he was a self-made crypto millionaire who didn't have to answer to anyone. Mrs. Vance didn't even look at Jackson. She merely gave a slight nod to the bodyguard on her left. Before Jackson could react, the bodyguard stepped forward, grabbed Jackson's pointing finger, and twisted it downward. Jackson let out a high-pitched shriek, dropping to his knees as his face contorted in agony. "Jackson," Sophie screamed, dropping her bag of cheese puffs. "Stop. Mother, tell him to stop. He's my husband." "Husband?" Mrs. Vance finally looked at Sophie, her eyes burning with disgust. "You married this pig? In a public hallway? Without my permission, without a prenuptial agreement, and while carrying a bastard child?" "He's not a pig," Sophie sobbed, throwing herself over Jackson, who was whimpering on the floor, clutching his bent finger. "Jackson is a genius. He made 1,000% profit last month. We are going to be richer than you'll ever be. He loves me, and we're starting a family." Mrs. Vance let out a cold, humorless laugh. She pulled her phone from her pocket and tossed it onto the dirty mattress. "A genius? Is that why his genius trading account was flagged for fraud this afternoon? Is that why my financial advisors tell me his so-called alpha fund is nothing but a textbook Ponzi scheme using money he borrowed from his gullible roommates?" Jackson's face went from red to a ghostly, sickly white. He looked up at Mrs. Vance, his arrogant bravado instantly evaporating. How do you know about that?" "Because I own the bank your accounts are registered with, you pathetic little boy," Mrs. Vance said smoothly. "And because I make it my business to know exactly who is trying to parasite off my family name." She turned her gaze back to Sophie. "Sophia, you have exactly 5 minutes to pack your things and get into the car. If you do not, I will cut off your trust fund, strip you of your inheritance, and remove your name from the family registry. You will be dead to me. You can live in this filth, raise your bastard child on instant noodles, and watch your genius husband go to federal prison. Choose." Sophie looked at her mother, then down at Jackson, who was still groveling on the floor, clutching his hand and refusing to look her in the eye. For a second, I thought Sophie might actually show some spine. I thought she might choose her epic, earth-shattering love. But Sophie was, at her core, a coward who loved luxury far more than she loved Jackson. Without a single word, she scrambled off the bed, grabbed her suitcase, and began shoving her clothes back into it, crying hysterically. She didn't even look at Jackson as she packed. Sophie, baby, you can't leave me," Jackson whimpered, reaching out to grab her ankle. "We have the baby, we have our future. Get off me," Sophie shrieked, kicking his hand away. "You told me you were rich. You told me you were going to buy me a penthouse. You lied to me." Within 3 minutes, Sophie's suitcase was packed. She stood by her mother's side, her head bowed, sobbing quietly. Mrs. Vance cast one final, disdainful look at Jackson. "If I ever see you near my daughter again, I will make sure the SEC looks into every single transaction you've made since you turned 18. Have a nice night." With that, Mrs. Vance turned and walked out, her heels clicking victoriously. Down the hall, Sophie followed her like a beaten dog. As they passed the corner where I was standing, Sophie caught sight of me. Her tear-streaked face twisted with a sudden, desperate hope. Rebecca, Rebecca, help me. Talk to my mother. Tell her how much Jackson loves me. I looked at her, my expression filled with nothing but deep, sorrowful pity. I'm so sorry, Sophie, I whispered softly, making sure Mrs. Vance could hear.
Me.
I tried to warn you about the reputation and the safety of the boys' dorm, but you insisted you wanted this. I can't go against your mother's wishes. She only wants what's best for you. Mrs. Vance paused, her sharp eyes landing on me. Her expression softened just a fraction. Rebecca, you are a sensible girl. Thank you for trying to talk some sense into her before this disaster happened. It's a shame she didn't listen to you. I did my best, Mrs. Vance, I said meekly. Come along, Sophia, Mrs. Vance snapped, dragging her daughter away. I watched their retreating backs, my heart hammering with a quiet, triumphant rhythm. The first phase of my revenge was complete. Sophie was dragged back too. Her mother's suffocating control, stripped of her freedom, and her perfect romance was in tatters. But I knew this wasn't the end. Jackson was cornered, and cornered rats always bite. Over the next 2 weeks, the campus atmosphere changed dramatically. With Sophie gone, Jackson's life deteriorated at an alarming speed. The rumor about his Ponzi scheme had spread like wildfire. It turned out Mrs. Vance wasn't lying. Jackson had convinced several of his wealthy roommates and other guys on the floor to invest their tuition money into his trading account, promising them guaranteed high returns based on his pure alpha instinct. But the crypto market had taken a massive downer. Jackson, refusing to cut his losses due to his arrogance, had doubled down on high-leverage shorts, only for the market to bounce back and liquidate his entire account. He had lost over $150,000 of his roommates' money. One afternoon, as I was walking past the campus lake, I saw a crowd gathered near the docks. Curious, I walked closer and saw Jackson surrounded by 4 of his former brothers, the same shirtless guys who had been throwing up peace signs in the wedding photos. But they weren't smiling now. The ringleader of the group was a tall, muscular guy named Leo. In my previous life, Leo had been the one who led the assault on me in the dark hallway of the boys' dorm. Seeing his face again made my blood run cold, but I forced myself to stay calm and watch from the shadows of a willow tree. Leo had Jackson by the collar of his shirt, pushing him against the wooden railing of the dock. Where is our money, Jackson? Leo growled, his fist clenched. My dad is going to kill me if he finds out my tuition for next semester is gone. You said it was a sure thing. I just need more time, Leo. Jackson stammered, his voice trembling. The market is just experiencing a temporary correction. If you guys can just pool together another 10 grand, I can buy the dip and make it all back. Slap. Leo delivered a backhand so hard that Jackson fell to the wooden planks, his nose bleeding. Do we look like idiots to you? Leo spat, kneeling down and grabbing Jackson by his hair. You spent our money on cheap weed, video games, and that pregnant girl of yours. You're going to pay us back, Jackson. Every single cent. Or we're going to make sure you never walk again. Sophie. Sophie's family has money. Jackson screamed desperately, trying to shield his face. Her mother is loaded. I'll get the money from her. She blocked your number, you idiot, another guy scoffed, kicking Jackson in the ribs. We saw her leaving campus with her mom's security. She's not coming back for you. I'll find a way. I swear. Jackson sobbed. I watched the scene with a cold detachment. Jackson, who had once stood so proudly, claiming that men had absolute physical dominance and that I wouldn't stand a chance in a real fight, was now whimpering on the ground like a whipped cur. I pulled out my phone, recorded a brief 10-second video of his humiliation, and saved it to an encrypted folder. Just keeping some memories, I thought to myself, echoing my own words from our last encounter. As the boys walked away, leaving Jackson groaning on the dock, I stepped out from behind the tree. I walked slowly down the dock, the heels of my boots clicking softly against the wood. Jackson heard the footsteps and looked up, his face covered in dirt, blood, and tears. When he saw me, his eyes widened with a mixture of rage and desperation. Rebecca, he gasped, spitting out some blood. Rebecca, please, you have to help me. You're Sophie's best friend. You can get to her. Tell her mother to give me a loan. Just $50,000. I can pay it back, I swear. I stopped a few feet away from him, looking down at his pathetic form. The Breeze from the lake blew my hair across my face, but I didn't bother to brush it away. Why would I do that, Jackson? I asked, my voice flat and devoid of any emotion. Because we're friends.
Because Sophie loves me, he begged.
Sophie doesn't love you, Jackson, I said softly, bending down slightly, so only
He could hear me.
She loved the idea of a rich boyfriend who would fund her lazy lifestyle. And you loved the idea of a pretty, submissive girl who would look at you like you're a god. You both used each other, and now the bill has
Come due.
Jackson's eyes narrowed as a sudden realization hit him. You did this. You told her mother, didn't you? You sent those pictures. I have no idea what you're talking about, I replied with a sweet, mocking smile. But if I did, I'd say you brought this entirely on yourself. After all, you run that floor, don't you? Your word is law. I stood up, turned on my heel, and walked away, leaving him screaming curses at my back. 3 weeks later, things took an even stranger turn. I was studying in my dorm room when a soft knock sounded at the door. I frowned, checking my security camera feed on my phone. To my utter surprise, Sophie was standing in the hallway. She looked terrible. The glowing, arrogant girl from a month ago was completely
gone.
Her designer clothes were replaced by a faded gray sweatsuit. Her hair was greasy and tied back in a messy bun, and the dark circles under her eyes made her look hollow. Her pregnant belly was even more prominent now, making her look clumsy and heavy. I unlocked the door and opened it just a crack. Sophie, I asked, keeping my voice neutral. What are you doing here? I thought your mother took you home. Rebecca. Sophie's voice cracked, and she immediately burst into tears, throwing her arms around me. In my past life, I would have hugged her back, felt my heart break for her, and offered her everything I had. This time, I kept my hands at my sides, letting her lean against me like a heavy, unwelcome sack of flour. Can I please come in? She sobbed. Just for a little bit? I have nowhere else
to go.
My mother. She's keeping me under house arrest. I had to sneak out through the basement window just to come here. I stepped back, allowing her to enter. She practically collapsed onto my desk chair, clutching her stomach and panting. What's wrong, Sophie? I asked, leaning against the balcony door. Everything is a mess, she wept, wiping her nose with her sleeve. My mother wants me to go to a clinic in Switzerland to take care of the baby.
She
says she won't let our family name be ruined by a bastard child of a fraudster. But I'm scared, Rebecca. I don't want to go to Switzerland. I want to keep my baby. I looked at her, searching for any genuine emotion in her eyes. But knowing her as well as I did, I could see the subtle, calculating glint behind her tears. Sophie didn't care about the baby. She cared about the fact that if she went to Switzerland, her mother would keep her under strict supervision for the rest of her life. She wanted to stay here because she still believed she could find a way to live a free, luxurious life without her mother's rules. And Jackson? I asked. Have you seen him?
No.
He's crazy, she shuddered. He keeps sending me threatening messages, saying if I don't get him $50,000, he'll release some private videos of us to the university board. He's a monster, Rebecca. You were right.
I
should have listened to you. She looked up at me, her eyes wide, watery, and filled with that familiar, manipulative innocence. Rebecca, you're my only friend left. Everyone else is laughing at me on the forums. Can I please stay with you? Just for a few days? My mother's security will find me if I go to a hotel, but they won't think to look for me in your room. I stared at her. In my past life, Sophie had lured me into the boys' dorm by claiming she was going into labor, leading directly to my assault. Now, she was standing in my room, begging to stay. My mind spun, calculating the variables. Why was she really here? Was she truly running from her mother, or was this another trap? Suddenly, my phone on the desk vibrated. It was an anonymous message on my campus social media account. If you want to save your friend, tell her to bring the cash to room 302 tonight. If she doesn't, or if she brings the cops, the videos go public.
And
don't think about hiding her. We know where you live. I looked at the message, then looked at Sophie, who was watching me out of the corner of her eye, pretending to wipe away her tears. I realized then, Sophie hadn't snuck out. She had been cornered by Jackson and his roommates. They had threatened her with the videos, and because she didn't have any money, she had come to me to act as her shield, or worse, to help her steal from my own savings to pay them off.
or
Perhaps they had planned to use me as leverage against my parents to get the money. A dark, freezing thrill coursed through my veins. They wanted a confrontation? They wanted to use the same old tricks?
Fine.
I would give them exactly what they wanted. But this time I would write the script. Of course you can stay, Sophie, I said, my face instantly softening into a warm, gentle smile. We're best friends, aren't we? I would never turn my back on you. Sophie's eyes lit up with a flash of triumph. Oh, Rebecca, thank you. I knew I could count on you. But, I continued, we can't stay here. My resident advisor is very strict this semester, and if she finds an extra person in here, we'll both get suspended.
I
Have a better idea. What? She asked, blinking. My family has a cabin just an hour outside of campus. I lied smoothly.
It's
Completely private and my parents rarely go there. We can go there tonight.
no.
One will find you. Tonight? Sophie hesitated. But I have to do something first.
I need to.
Meet someone. Just to settle things. Is it Jackson? I asked, my voice dripping with concern. Sophie, you can't go
Alone.
He's dangerous. Let me go with you. We can face him together and then we'll go straight to the cabin. Sophie looked surprised, but then a slow, dark satisfaction settled into her expression. Really? You'd do that for me? Of course, I smiled, my fingers tightening behind my back. I'll do anything. For my best friend. At 10 p.m., the campus was quiet. A thick fog had rolled in from the lake, wrapping the concrete buildings of a university in a cold, gray shroud. Sophie and I walked side by side toward Sector 3. She was walking slowly, occasionally groaning and clutching her stomach to emphasize her delicate state. I held her arm, playing the role of the supportive, worried friend. Inside my jacket pocket, my phone was active. I had set up a live audio video, broadcast to a secure cloud server, and I had also sent a scheduled message to two very important recipients, Mrs. Vance and the university chancellor's emergency hotline. The message contained the exact location, the nature of the extortion, and a warning that student lives were in immediate danger. We took the elevator to the third floor. The hallway was dark, the cheap balloons from the wedding now nothing but shriveled plastic husks on the floor. When we reached room 302, Sophie hesitated, her hand trembling on the doorknob. Rebecca, she whispered. I'm scared. Don't worry, I whispered back, my voice steady and cold. I'm right here. Sophie pushed the door open. The room was dimly lit by a single desk lamp. The air was thick with the smell of cheap weed and stale beer. Sitting on the bed was Jackson. His face was still bruised from his beating, and his eyes were wild and bloodshot. Standing behind him were Leo and the other three roommates, their arms crossed, looking like cheap thugs in a low-budget
Movie.
As soon as we entered, Leo stepped forward and slammed the door shut behind us, locking it with a heavy click. Well, Jackson sneered, standing up slowly. Look who decided to show up. And you brought a guest. He looked at me, a nasty, victorious grin spreading across his face. Rebecca, the girl who thinks she's so tough. The girl who twisted my wrist. What's the matter? Not so brave now that you're in my territory, are you? I didn't answer. I kept my eyes on Leo, the man who, in my past life, had laughed as he dragged me into the darkness. My body screamed at me to run, but my mind was a block of solid ice. I stood my ground. Jackson, please, Sophie whined, stepping forward. I brought Rebecca. She's my friend. She has money. Her parents are rich. Just give us the videos and let us go. I looked at Sophie. She didn't even try to hide her betrayal. She had brought me here specifically to be her financial sacrificial lamb. Money. Leo laughed, stepping closer to me. He reached out a hand to touch my chin, but I stepped back, my eyes flashing with a dangerous light. Don't touch me, I said, my voice quiet and calm. Oh, look at her, Leo mocked, turning to his friends. She's still got that attitude. Hey, Jackson, your girlfriend's friend is kind of cute when she's mad. Maybe we don't need $50,000 in cash. Maybe we can find other ways to settle the debt. The other guys laughed, stepping closer, closing the distance between us. This was the exact moment from my past life. The same room, the same dirty walls, the same terrifying laughter, the same feeling of helplessness. But this time, I wasn't helpless. Jackson, I said, ignoring Leo entirely. You're recording this, right? You want to use this to extort my parents? Jackson pulled a camera out from under his desk, pointing it at us.
That's
Right, Rebecca. Your parents love their perfect, straight-A daughter. Let's see how much they're willing to pay to keep your reputation intact. Once we're done with you, you'll be just as ruined as Sophie. So, I continued, taking a step back toward the door. You are admitting to conspiracy, extortion, kidnapping, and planned sexual assault? On camera? Jackson laughed hysterically. Who cares? Who's going to believe you? In this dorm, my vortis.
boom.
The heavy wooden door of room 302 didn't just open, it shattered. The lock flew off, and the door slammed inward, hitting Leo squarely in the back and sending him crashing into the desk. Through the dust and the dark hallway, 6 police officers in full tactical gear stormed into the room, their weapons drawn, flashlight beams cutting through the
Haze.
police. Get down on the ground.
Now.
The scream of the officers echoed in the tiny room. Jackson screamed in terror, dropping his camera as he threw himself onto the
Floor.
Leo tried to scramble toward the balcony, but 2 officers immediately tackled him to the ground, slamming his face into the concrete floor. Hands behind your back. Don't move. The room erupted into absolute chaos. Sophie screamed, covering her ears, while the other roommates were pinned to the floor one by one, their wrists cuffed in tight plastic zip ties. Through the doorway walked Mrs. Vance, flanked by the university chancellor and the chief of campus security. Mrs. Vance's face was pale with a mixture of rage and horror as she looked at the scene, the drugs on the table, the weapons, and her daughter standing in the middle of it. Sophia, Mrs. Vance whispered, her voice shaking with absolute disgust.
You.
Lied to me. You snuck out to come back to this den of thieves. Mother. No. Sophie sobbed, rushing toward her. They forced me.
They
Threatened me. Rebecca brought me here. It was her idea. I stood quietly in the corner, adjusting my jacket. I pulled my phone out and stopped the live stream. Actually, Mrs. Vance, I said, my voice clear and calm over the sound of the crying and the police radios. I have the entire conversation recorded on my
phone.
Sophie came to my room willingly to ask me to help her pay off Jackson's
Debt.
When I refused, she suggested we come here to negotiate. I only came along because I was worried they would hurt her, and because I wanted to make sure the police had enough evidence to catch them all. I handed my phone to the chief of security. The live stream has everything from Jackson admitting to the Ponzi scheme, the extortion, to the planned assault. The chancellor looked at the recording, his face turning an angry shade of red. He looked at Jackson, Leo, and the other roommates who were being dragged out in handcuffs. You are all officially expelled from this university, effective immediately. The chancellor barked. And the university will be pressing full criminal charges. We will not tolerate this kind of filth on our campus. Jackson looked up from the floor, his face covered in dust and tears, his eyes landing on me. You set us up, he whispered, his voice broken. No, Jackson, I said, looking down at him one last time. You set yourselves
Up.
You just forgot that in the real world, actions have consequences. The scandal shook the university to its very foundation. The story of the dorm wedding and the subsequent police raid became national
News.
Jackson, Leo, and their roommates were denied bail due to the severity of the extortion and drug charges. Jackson's investment fund was officially declared a fraudulent scheme, and his family was forced to declare bankruptcy to pay back the victims. He faced up to 15 years in a federal penitentiary. Leo and the other roommates who had planned to assault me were sentenced to 10 years each for conspiracy and attempted kidnapping. In this life, they would never get the chance to ruin another girl's life. Sophie's fate was perhaps the most fitting of all. Because of her involvement in the extortion scheme and her constant lies, Mrs. Vance completely cut her off. She was officially disowned, her name erased from the Vance Family Trust. With no money, no education, and no friends, Sophie was forced to move into a low-income housing unit provided by the state. A few months later, she gave birth to a baby boy. A DNA test, insisted upon by Mrs. Vance's lawyers to protect the family estate, revealed a final, shocking twist. The baby wasn't even Jackson's. It belonged to one of his roommates, the very same Leo, who was now sitting in a prison cell. Sophie's epic, earth-shattering romance had ended in a cramped, damp apartment, with her crying over cheap formula while the campus forums continued to mock her as the queen of the house. As for me, I stood on the balcony of my new, quiet single-occupancy dorm room, looking out over the campus courtyard. The sun was setting, casting a warm, golden glow over the trees. The air was fresh and clean, free of the smoke and the lies that had suffocated my previous
life.
My phone buzzed. It was an email from the department head congratulating me on securing a prestigious internship for the upcoming semester. I smiled, taking a sip of my iced latte. In my past life, I had died in the cold, dark hallway of Sector 3, my future. Stolen by a girl I called my best friend. But in this life, I had survived. I had fought back. And as I looked out at the bright, beautiful horizon, I knew that my future was finally, truly mine.